So many jokes, so little time. So Venom is directed by Ruben Fleischer, the director of Zombieland, and stars Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock, who is an investigative journalist who, after coming across the foundation known as the Life Foundation and also its founder, Carlton Drake, uncovers these mysterious tests that are going on behind the scenes involving an alien species known as the symbiote, and soon gets infected by the symbiote himself, creating an anti-hero which is a cross between Eddie Brock and Venom. Now, when this movie was first announced, I couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't believe the fact that this movie was actually going to happen. A Venom standalone movie in this new Sony Spider-Man villain cinematic universe without Spider-Man in it. And I always said to myself, I'm not going to believe this until I actually see it, because I didn't believe this movie would actually come out. I didn't think it would actually happen. And now it's actually here. Well, it's quite surreal in a way. First off, Tom Hardy is absolutely fantastic in this film. I think he's easily the strongest part of it. I think he's a really great central lead. I mean, I love Tom Hardy anyway. He's a great actor. You know, I love him pretty much everything he does. So this is a very interesting role for him to take on, however. I haven't really seen him do this before. It's a very over-exuberant, very loud, very over-the-top performance from Tom Hardy, but it works very, very well for this film, I think, overall, in terms of how it fits in, and I think it's a very stellar performance. And again, I think without Tom Hardy, this movie would have maybe fallen apart and been a lot more on the forgettable side, but I think Tom Hardy really does a lot for boosting this movie up, so I think you have to give a lot of credit to Tom Hardy to actually really giving it his all in this film, because he really delivers the goods here. And Venom himself was very entertaining in this film. I think the CGI for Venom was pretty good on the whole. I think it was actually pretty well done. I was pretty skeptical on it, to say the least, when I saw it in the trailers. I mean, the trailers weren't exactly impressive for this film, but I actually think the CGI overall for Venom was pretty good, and the relationship between Venom and Eddie Brock is so entertaining. It's so funny, very witty. It's, you know, Tom Hardy doing the voice of Venom as well, so it's just Tom Hardy playing off of himself, which is very entertaining to watch, and just the banter between the two is very funny as they get to know each other, and their arc that they go through in terms of how to accept each other, and their arc that they end up with the end of the film is actually quite commendable, and I actually thought it was actually pretty well written on the whole. Maybe not in terms of its individual dialogue, because it was pretty shaky, maybe even bad at points, but I think in terms of how they got to that end point, it was actually pretty nice. Also, this film went by like that. Like, this movie was just over really, really quickly, and I think it was really well paced on the whole. I didn't think there was much of a slowdown. There wasn't really much time to really, you know, just keep the pace from going at the pace it should go. It was actually really well paced, and I think it was really good in that. And I think the score is really well done in this film. I can't remember the name of the composer off the top of my head, but he is very good, and I actually think the score really did a lot to add to this film, and I actually think it was a lot better than it actually really needed to be. I was expecting a lot more of a generic type score for this, but it was actually very well handled, and actually I think it did a lot to actually boost the movie, and especially in its action sequences, and even in a lot more of its, you know, somber tone moments. I think it did a lot to boost those scenes as well. And also Eminem's song that he did, I have to admit, when they first released the song and I listened to it, I wasn't a big fan, but when you hear it in the movie itself, I think it does actually come out a lot better, because maybe you're just in the mindset for it, or maybe it fits the movie better than it does just listening to it normally. But I like that song now. I didn't earlier, so if that means anything. Now, going into the negatives of this movie, Michelle Williams is absolutely wasted in this film. She is such a talented actress, obviously Oscar nominated. She is a true talent, and she is completely swept under the rug in this film. She plays Eddie Brock's girlfriend in this, and she just doesn't have that much to do. She's got one cool scene, and they try to use that scene to make her come across as a bit more capable and a bit more, you know, less of a cliche. But after that scene's over, she immediately goes back to the cliche, so it doesn't really pay off. And while that scene was cool and quite interesting in its own right, and I did quite enjoy it, for the rest of the film, I think Michelle Williams was completely wasted. I'm surprised she took this movie, to be honest, but it's a shame. And also, her chemistry with Tom Hardy is kind of non-existent. There's not really much there happening, so when their scenes are together, especially there's a scene very early on, I think it's maybe how the film opens, maybe, if I remember correctly, between Tom Hardy and Michelle Williams, and the chemistry was just dead, and it just, I was kind of thinking, oh, this is not going to go well. Also, Riz Ahmed as Carlton Drake, the villain of this film, was so generic and so deadpan, so one-note. I feel like he was just very bland in his overall performance, which is a shame because Riz Ahmed is a really good actor. He's really good. I've seen him in so many films, and I think he's excellent in everything he does. But this is easily his weakest role. I can't quite tell if it was the acting, how he was told to act it by the director, or the writing. But there were so many different things going on with his character in terms of behind the scenes stuff. I don't quite know what they were going for, because in some elements he starts off as being quite understated, being quite quiet in that menacing, not necessarily menacing because it doesn't come across like that, but they were trying to, do a menacing version by keeping him quite quiet and quite subdued. But then towards the back half of the movie he becomes this shouting, loud character, and again, that doesn't work either, so it never has this middle ground to actually explore. So I found like his villain overall was very, very weak, and of course you'll see from the trailers he is the symbiote known as Riot, and when Riot shows up, it's cool because I like that person from a fan standpoint, I like seeing the other symbiotes, but, it just kind of culminated in just another big CGI creature on screen. The third act's also quite weird because it does kind of devolve into this big CGI mess battle which I thought would happen, which in a way is kind of unavoidable in a movie like this, given the fact that this is Venom and he's going to be taking on other symbiotes. But I feel like there are better ways around it than just doing big CGI mess, just big CGI things slapping at each other. I feel there were ways around it. And also that third act came around really quick. It just came out of nowhere. I was kind of just enjoying myself in the second act, and then the third act was just like, oh, we're here, it's the big fight, let's go. And I was like, okay. So there was actually quite a lot of urgency to get to that final act, and it just came around really quickly, which took me by surprise. And like I mentioned earlier, the dialogue is pretty crappy in this. There's quite a lot of just bad dialogue, to be honest. There's quite a lot of cringy moments. It's quite I can't quite tell if it's intentional. That's the thing with this movie. It's very difficult to explain. I can't quite tell if this movie is supposed to be unironically funny, ironically funny, or it's actually trying to be good, or it's trying to be bad. I can't quite tell. However, overall, I really had a good time with Venom. This movie was really surprising, and this movie was, this review maybe was a bit mishmash, and it's because it's a really difficult movie to talk about. It's really weird to explain. Like I said, personally, I really enjoyed this movie. I think it has a lot of fun things within it, and I had a good time overall, and it went by really fast for me. But there are just so many moments in this film that really are just like, ooh, that was quite bad. The dialogue's not very good. The CGI can be, especially towards the end, a bit heavy-handed. And I feel like there are some cool moments, but there are also a lot of bad moments too. And there's a lot of funny moments too. I think this movie is very funny at points, but again, I couldn't quite tell at times whether I was laughing at the movie or with the movie, and whether the movie was aware of that. I feel like there are a lot of moments that are very self-aware, but there are also other moments that try to take itself very seriously, and that almost makes it more funny. So how you fall on this movie, I really don't know. I don't know if it depends on you. I don't know if it depends on your perception of Venom on the comics. It's a really strange one. So did you guys see Venom? If you did, tell me all your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? How did you feel overall? Like I said, this is a weird movie to discuss. But let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, if you want to see more movie reviews from me, be sure to subscribe. And I hope to see you guys again in my next review.